Handel hat sich völlig geändert. Früher haben wir Produkte ausgetauscht, jetzt haben wir 80% globale Wertschöpfungsketten. Und es kann auch nicht sein, dass diejenigen, die in dieser globalen Wertschöpfungskette tätig sind, andere, schlechtere Bedingungen haben als Kolleginnen und Kollegen in Europa. Und deswegen geht es genau darum, in der globalen Wertschöpfungskette fundamentale Standards für Arbeitnehmerrechte und für Umwelt sicherzustellen, damit die Arbeitsbedingungen fair sind.
In Bangladesh, Cambodia, Pakistan and Vietnam, countries deeply integrated in the global supply chains, women and men work back-breaking hours in unsafe environments and still struggle to make ends meet. Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung in Asia is hard at work to support decent work for all in the global supply chains of garments, shoes and electronics industries. A new project reinforces the old idea of linking trade and labour rights. Labour provisions must become a binding and enforceable part of trade agreements.
We are looking back at 20 years now of the Fundamental Declaration of Workers' Rights in 1998, which came into existence because the WTO didn't want to include the social clause into the trade agreements, and the ILO took over this role and set the standards. Now we have seen that all over the years, in spite of the Declaration of Fundamental Workers' Rights, in spite of trade agreements that contain social clauses, workers' rights, working conditions still deteriorated.
If we look at the global garment industry today, we find a series of worker rights abuses and related issues. First and foremost, we find persistently low wages. One recent study shows that no major garment exporting country pays even half of a living wage. In some countries, wages do not even cover 1/5 of a worker's basic needs. We're talking about wages such as $68 a month in Bangladesh, $21 a month in Ethiopia. Second, we find chronic overtime. In many garment exporting countries, we find workers not only doing overtime hours on a regular basis, but also doing so many overtime hours that they're violating the absolute cap on overtime hours in their countries. Third, we find garment workers employed in horrifically unsafe buildings. In order to save money, many suppliers set up operations in cheap and ultimately unsafe buildings. For the last several decades, we have been telling poor countries that the first step toward development is garment exports. That is fine as an idea, and it worked for many countries. The problem is that we have been telling this to dozens and dozens of poor countries, and we are now at a point of overcapacity. Many small and medium-sized retailers are going out of business, and several large retailers are becoming larger and larger. This has created an enormous power imbalance that allows the big retailers and brands to squeeze on price and to squeeze on lead times. This price squeeze is then translated into a wage squeeze and a worker rights squeeze.
And while the garment sector receives a lot of international attention, little is paid to the situation in footwear and electronics.
For example, in the footwear industry, we found that among the suppliers that we've been through, their price offered by the brands have not been increased over the past 5 years. And the brands would tell them that, well, if you want to keep the profit margin or to increase it, it's up to you to increase your own efficiency.
To boost productivity, companies increase the level of automation and reduce the number of workers. Even when productivity gains increase substantially, workers' wages remain at the legal minimum wage. In the global supply chain of the electronics industry, things are worse. A small number of brands own the market share. This puts them in position to dictate purchasing prices paid to their suppliers and to reduce them every few months. For example, in Vietnam, workers in companies producing mobile phones for major brands work up to 100 hours of overtime per month during peak production time. This is 3 times the legal limit.
Of course, corporations, to maximize their returns, will always shop for the global best deal. The problem isn't just that there's a race to the bottom. The problem is that the bottom is currently so low.
Und wir müssen in Handelsverträgen einfach auch die Arbeitsbedingungen festlegen, damit dieses universelle Arbeitnehmergrundgesetz gilt. Also das ist eine Aufgabe von modernen Handelsabkommen. Aber zum Zweiten, glaube ich, muss man auch die Unternehmen in die Pflicht nehmen, die von Bedingungen profitieren, die nicht akzeptabel sind. Und deswegen wollen wir auch klar sagen, nicht nur Investoren haben mitunter Rechte zum Schutz ihrer Investitionen, nein, sie haben auch Pflichten.
Learning from extensive research in 4 exporting countries, Cambodia, Bangladesh, Vietnam and Pakistan, one thing becomes clear from the link between trade and labour rights along global supply chains in the production of garments, shoes and electronics. On top of the core labour standards agreed in 1998, people working down these supply chains need stronger support to receive living wage, safe working conditions and fair working hours. These rights make up the plus elements that Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung will be promoting as binding and enforceable elements in trade agreements as part of its new project in Asia, Core Labour Standards Plus.
Und da ist dieses Projekt schon eins, was eben deutlich macht, es reicht nicht alleine aus, nur bei den Produzenten und bei den produzierenden Staaten anzusetzen, sondern wir müssen auf die Handelsebene mit eingehen und wir müssen sehen, ob wir beides miteinander so verschränkt kriegen, dass wir etwas hinkriegen, sozusagen verlinken können. Das war aber auch eine Erkenntnis der Gewerkschaftsbewegung, dass wir gesagt haben, wenn wir nicht tatsächlich entlang der Wertschöpfungskette politisch agieren und auch entlang der Wertschöpfungskette gewerkschaftlich organisieren, werden wir nicht weiterkommen. Und dass die Ebert-Stiftung da einen guten Beitrag leistet, da bin ich froh.